Commander Sylth stood on the bridge of the Harmonious Accord, his three-fingered hands gripping the edge of his command console. The view screen showed something that made his skin turn pale blue with fear. Hundreds of dark shapes moved through the asteroid field ahead, each one as large as a cargo ship. "Run the identification scan again," Sylth said to his sensor officer. His voice stayed calm, but inside he felt cold terror spreading through his chest. The sensor officer, a younger Velthani named Korath, worked quickly at his station. His fingers moved across the holographic controls with practiced ease. After a moment, he looked up at Sylth, his large eyes wide with shock. "Commander, the scan confirms it. These match the ancient records. They are Kreshnak." The word hung in the air like poison. Every member of the bridge crew knew that name. Every child in the Confederation learned about the Kreshnak in their history lessons. They were the nightmare that ended civilizations, the swarm that consumed entire star systems. They had been gone for 3,000 years, sleeping in the dark between stars. Now, they were awake. Sylth watched as one of the Kreshnak creatures changed direction. It moved toward his ship with impossible speed. The thing looked like a horrible mix of machine and living flesh. Its body was covered in black metal plates that shifted and moved like muscles. Bright red lights glowed where eyes might be. "Raise shields. Charge weapons," Sylth ordered. He followed every rule in the Confederation military handbook. He had trained for 15 years to command a ship. He knew every protocol, every procedure. The ship's defensive grid activated. Blue energy shields wrapped around the Harmonious Accord like a protective bubble. The weapon systems came online, charging their energy banks. On the tactical display, Sylth could see his ship's weapons locking onto the approaching Kreshnak scout. "Fire," he commanded. Bright beams of concentrated energy shot out from the ship's weapons arrays. They struck the Kreshnak creature dead center. The creature's shields flared white, then failed. The beams burned into its hull. For a moment, Sylth felt hope. Maybe the ancient records were wrong. Maybe these things could be defeated. Then he watched in horror as the Kreshnak's hull began to change. The black metal plates shifted and reformed. They grew thicker, developing a mirror-like surface. The next volley of energy beams bounced off harmlessly, reflected away into empty space. "It adapted," Korath whispered. "In less than 30 seconds, it adapted to our weapons." More Kreshnak emerged from the asteroid field. 5, then 10, then 20. They moved like a school of fish, perfectly coordinated. They surrounded the Harmonious Accord from all sides. "Evasive maneuvers," Sylth ordered. "Get us out of here." The ship's engines fired, pushing the vessel away from the swarm. But the Kreshnak were faster. They closed in, their weapons charging with an orange glow. The first impacts hit the shields, draining their power rapidly. Alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Sylth made a decision. "Open a channel to Confederation Command. Emergency frequency. Protocol 7. Protocol 7 meant only one thing: extinction-level threat. It was a signal that had not been used in over 500 years. The communication officer established the connection. Sylth spoke quickly, describing everything they had found. He transmitted all sensor data, showing the size of the Kreshnak fleet hidden in the asteroids. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, enough to threaten every world in this sector of space. The response from Confederation Command came quickly, but it was not what Sylth hoped to hear. The nearest fleet was 3 weeks away. There were no ships available for immediate support. The Confederation was spread too thin, dealing with border disputes and political problems. Sylth and his crew were on their own. "Find us a place to hide," Sylth told his navigator. "Somewhere we can buy time." The navigator found a small moon orbiting a nearby gas giant. The moon had a thin atmosphere and was barely suitable for life, but it had caves where they could hide the ship. They limped toward it, their shields failing, their hull taking damage from the pursuing Kreshnak. They made it to the moon with minutes to spare. The ship landed hard in a rocky valley, its landing gear scraping against stone. The crew began setting up temporary shelters in nearby caves. They would need to stay hidden while they waited for rescue that might never come. Sylth sat in his temporary command post, a small cave lit by portable lights. He stared at the communication console, watching for any response to his distress signal. Hours passed. The only replies came from distant Confederation stations, all saying the same thing. Help was coming, but it would take weeks. Then a new signal appeared. It came from an unknown ship. The encryption was different from any Confederation standard. The message was short and written in simple trade language. "We heard you. Help is coming. Hang tight." Sylth checked the identification codes attached to the message. His eyes widened when he saw the species designation, human, from Earth, the Death World. He had read the reports about Earth. It was a Class 12 Death World, one of the most dangerous planets ever discovered. The gravity was crushing. The weather was violent and unpredictable. The native life forms were aggressive predators. Somehow, humans had evolved there and survived. The Confederation had only made first contact with humanity 2 years ago. They were new to galactic society, rough around the edges, strange in their customs. The Council was still debating whether to grant them full membership. Now somehow, these Deathworlders were coming to help. Sylth looked at the response message for a long time. 3 days, maybe 4, and help would arrive. If they could survive that long. If the Kreshnak did not find them first. If the humans were really coming at all. He had no choice but to wait and hope that the Deathworlders knew what they were doing. 3 days felt like 3 years to Commander Sylth. His crew lived in the caves, watching the sensors constantly. The Kreshnak were still out there, searching through the asteroid field. Twice, scout drones had passed close to the moon, their sensors sweeping the surface. Both times, Sylth had ordered complete power shutdown. His people sat in the dark and cold, barely breathing, waiting for the drones to move on. On the 3rd day, something appeared on their long-range sensors. A ship was coming out of faster-than-light travel, but it was not coming out the normal way. Korath stared at his sensor display, his mouth hanging open. "Commander, you need to see this." Sylth rushed to the sensor station. The approaching ship was still in FTL space, but it was decelerating far too quickly. Normal FTL exit procedures took hours of careful calculation and gradual speed reduction. This ship was just stopping. It was like watching someone run full speed into a wall. "That's not possible," Sylth whispered. "The stress forces would tear any ship apart." The human vessel burst out of FTL space in a flash of blue light. Its hull glowed red-hot from the thermal energy. Pieces of armor plating were literally melting off its surface. Emergency vents along its sides released superheated gas in great plumes. The ship looked like it had just flown through a star, but it was intact, damaged, smoking, with half its outer hull glowing like hot metal, but intact. "They did that on purpose," Korath said in disbelief. "They actually meant to exit that way." The human ship was larger than the Harmonious Accord, built with hard angles and thick armor. It looked like a weapon more than a vessel. Along its sides, Sylth could see scorch marks and repair patches from previous battles. This ship had seen combat. A lot of combat. A communication request came through. Sylth accepted it, and the view screen changed to show the interior of the human ship's bridge. A woman sat in the command chair, wearing a dark blue uniform with various insignia that Sylth did not recognize. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her eyes were the color of Earth's oceans. Those eyes were positioned on the front of her face, like a predator's eyes, made for hunting. "Commander Sylth of the Harmonious Accord?" she asked. Her voice was confident and direct. "Yes, I am Commander Sylth. Are you the help that was promised?" The woman smiled, showing her white teeth. Captain Elena Vasquez commanding the UNSC Reckoning. We got your distress call. Sorry it took us a few days. We were on the other side of the sector. A few days. They had crossed distances that should take weeks, and they called it a few days. Sylth felt a strange mix of hope and worry. These humans did not follow normal rules. Captain Vasquez, I'm grateful for your response. I have prepared a detailed briefing on the Kreshnak threat. The swarm consists of approximately 800 individual units, ranging from scout class to— How many bad guys and where are they? Vasquez interrupted. Sylth blinked. Excuse me? The hostile forces. How many and where can we find them? 800 Kreshnak units in the asteroid field, but Captain, I really should explain their adaptation capabilities and— Got it. 800 bugs in the rocks. We'll handle this. Vasquez looked to someone off-screen. Hendricks, launch all fighters. Tell them it's hunting season. The communication cut off before Sylth could say another word. He stood there, staring at the blank view screen, his mouth open. Handle this? She was going to handle 800 Kreshnak with one ship? Commander, Korath called out, the human ship is launching small craft. Dozens of them. Sylth pulled up the tactical display. Small fighter ships were pouring out of the reckoning like angry insects from a nest. They formed up in loose groups, not the tight military formations the Confederation used. Then they accelerated toward the asteroid field at speeds that made Sylth's stomach turn. Those G-forces, Sylth said quietly. The pilots inside those craft should be unconscious. The acceleration alone should kill them. But the human pilots were not unconscious. Sylth could hear their communication chatter on the open channels. They were talking to each other, casual and relaxed, as if they were not flying toward certain death. Blue 3, you see that big rock on your left? I bet I can thread the gap faster than you. Oh, you're on, Hellhound. Loser buys drinks at Murphy's. All call signs. This is Blue Leader. Remember, stay frosty and watch your 6. These bugs are fast. The fighters reached the asteroid field and dove in without slowing down. Sylth watched in horror as they weaved between massive rocks at impossible speeds. One fighter passed within meters of an asteroid, so close that Sylth was certain it would crash. But the pilot pulled up at the last possible moment, actually laughing over the comm channel. Just like the Kessel Run, the pilot shouted. The Kreshnak responded to the intrusion. Scout drones emerged from hiding spots among the asteroids. They were fast and coordinated, moving as one mind. Their weapons charged up, glowing orange in the darkness of space. The human fighters did not retreat. They accelerated toward the enemy. The first engagement lasted less than 30 seconds. Plasma weapons fired from both sides, lighting up space with bright flashes. 2 Kreshnak drones exploded. One human fighter took damage, its right engine trailing smoke, but kept flying. Blue 7 is hit. Engine 2 is out, but I can still fly this bucket. Blue 7, return to base for repairs. Negative, Blue Leader. I didn't come all this way to miss the party. The damaged fighter continued fighting, using its one remaining engine to maintain position. Its pilot targeted another Kreshnak drone and fired, destroying it with a well-placed shot. Sylth could not believe what he was seeing. These humans fought like they were enjoying themselves. They took risks that no Confederation pilot would ever take. They pushed their ships to the breaking point and beyond. When their plasma weapons proved less effective after the Kreshnak adapted, they switched to solid projectile weapons. When those ran low, one pilot actually rammed his fighter into a Kreshnak drone, ejecting in an escape pod at the last second before impact. Hellhound, did you just use your fighter as a missile? Captain Vasquez's voice came over the comm, sounding more amused than angry. It seemed like a good idea at the time, Captain. Well, it worked. Good kill. Now get your butt back to the barn and try not to trash any more multi-million credit spacecraft. Yes, ma'am. Commander Sylth sat down heavily in his chair. watching the chaos unfold on his screens. The humans were not following any military doctrine he knew. They were improvising, adapting, and somehow winning against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. This was not what he expected when he called for help. But perhaps, Sylth thought, this was exactly what they needed. The battle in the asteroid field continued for 2 hours. Commander Sylth watched from his temporary command post, trying to make sense of the human tactics. Every time he thought he understood their strategy, they changed it completely. The Kreshnak adapted quickly, as they always did. When the human plasma weapons became less effective, the drones developed reflective armor plating. Sylth expected the humans to retreat and recalculate their approach. That was proper military procedure. Study the enemy's new defenses, develop a counter-strategy, then engage again. The humans did not retreat. They switched weapons. "All fighters, go kinetic," Captain Vasquez ordered over the comm channel. "Let's see them adapt to good old-fashioned bullets." The human fighters began firing solid metal projectiles at incredible velocities. The Kreshnak drones, designed to deflect energy weapons, were not ready for physical impacts. Several drones were destroyed before they could adapt again. But the Kreshnak were fast learners. Their armor began to thicken, developing dense layers that could absorb kinetic impacts. The bullets became less effective. Sylth expected the humans to retreat now. They had tried 2 different weapon types. Both had failed. It was time to pull back and rethink their strategy. Instead, one of the human pilots accelerated directly toward a cluster of Kreshnak drones. His fighter's engines burned at maximum power. Alarms sounded in his cockpit, warning of imminent reactor overload. "Hellhound! What are you doing?" Blue Leader called out. "Something stupid, probably. Ejecting in 3, 2, 1. The pilot ejected in a small escape pod just as his fighter's reactor reached critical levels. The fighter continued on its course, slamming into the middle of the Kreshnak formation. The reactor exploded in a brilliant flash of white light. When the light faded, 7 Kreshnak drones were gone, vaporized by the blast. Sylth stood up from his chair, his legs shaking. Did that pilot just turn his ship into a bomb? Korath nodded slowly, equally shocked. "Yes, Commander, and he's laughing about it." The comm channels confirmed it. Hellhound's voice came through, cheerful despite having just destroyed his own ship. "Confirmed kills on 7 targets. That's gotta be worth at least 3 rounds at Murphy's. If you survive long enough to collect," another pilot responded, also laughing. Captain Vasquez's voice cut through the chatter. "Good work, Hellhound. All fighters form up and return to the reckoning. We've got their attention. Now comes the fun part." Sylth wanted to ask what she meant by the fun part, but he was interrupted by alarms from his own sensor station. Multiple Kreshnak signals were changing course. They were heading toward the moon, toward his position. "They've found us," Korath said, his voice filled with fear. "Commander, we need to evacuate immediately." Sylth ran calculations in his head. They could not get the Harmonious Accord flight ready in time. The ship had taken too much damage during their escape. Evacuation meant cramming his entire crew into small shuttles with no weapons and no shields. They would be defenseless. His communication console beeped. Captain Vasquez appeared on the screen again. "Commander, looks like you've got company incoming. Don't worry. We've got a plan." "Captain, with respect, my crew and I should evacuate. We cannot defend this position against that many." "Do you have any volatile materials in your cargo?" Vasquez interrupted. "Mining explosives, fuel cells, anything that goes boom?" Sylth blinked, confused by the question. "We have industrial plasma cutters and several barrels of reactor coolant for our engines. But I don't see how—" "Perfect. We're sending down a Marine unit. Lieutenant Chen and his team will help you set up a warm welcome for our bug friends. Just do exactly what they say, and try to keep up." The connection ended before Sylth could protest. He looked at Korath, who looked back at him with equal confusion. "What are they planning?" Korath asked. I have no idea, Sylth admitted. 20 minutes later, 3 human dropships descended through the moon's thin atmosphere. They landed hard near the caves, their engines kicking up clouds of dust and small rocks. The rear ramps dropped, and human marines poured out, wearing heavy armor and carrying weapons that looked brutal and efficient. A tall human approached Sylth. His armor was marked with signs of previous battles, dented and scarred. He removed his helmet, revealing a young face with dark eyes and short black hair. Commander Sylth, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, UNSC Marines. We're here to help you fortify this position. Fortify? Sylth asked. Lieutenant, there are over 200 Kreshnak units heading toward us. We should evacuate, not fortify. Chen smiled, and Sylth saw that same predator expression that Captain Vasquez had. Commander, humans have a saying. Sometimes the best defense is a really creative offense. Show me those plasma cutters and coolant barrels. What followed was the most chaotic 2 hours of Sylth's life. The human marines moved through the Velthani encampment like a whirlwind, taking equipment and supplies and turning them into weapons. They removed the plasma cutters from the Harmonious Accord and rigged them to fire on remote triggers, creating improvised mines. They spread the reactor coolant in specific patterns across the ground, turning it into a chemical trap. The coolant contains compounds that will mess with their sensors, Chen explained while working. They hunt by detecting energy signatures and chemical traces. This stuff will blind them, make them confused. One Marine, a woman with red hair and a wild grin, was taking apart the communication array. Sylth rushed over to stop her. That's our only long-range transmitter. We need that to call for help. The Marine looked at him and winked. We're turning it into an EMP generator. One big pulse will fry every Kreshnak within half a kilometer. Don't worry, Commander. We know what we're doing. This is insane, Sylth muttered to himself. You're taking apart critical systems and turning them into improvised weapons. Lieutenant Chen overheard him and laughed. Welcome to Human Military Engineering, Commander. We learned a long time ago that when you're fighting for survival, everything is a weapon if you're creative enough. The Kreshnak arrived an hour later. They came in a coordinated swarm, hundreds of drones moving together like a single organism. They descended on the moon, confident in their numbers and their adaptive capabilities. They landed in the kill zone the humans had prepared. The plasma cutters activated first, their beams slicing through Kreshnak armor with surgical precision. The drones tried to adapt, but before they could, the reactor coolant traps released their contents. The chemical cloud spread quickly in the low gravity, enveloping the Kreshnak swarm. The drones lost their coordination, unable to sense each other or their targets. Then the communication array activated, sending out one massive electromagnetic pulse. The pulse disabled dozens of drones immediately, their systems overloading and shutting down. The human Marines opened fire from their positions in the rocks, picking off confused and blinded targets. The Kreshnak, used to fighting organized enemies with predictable tactics, could not adapt quickly enough to this chaos. Sylth watched from his position, sheltered behind a rock formation. He saw Lieutenant Chen standing in the open, calmly firing his weapon at approaching drones, not showing any fear even as enemy fire passed within meters of him. This was impossible. These humans were turning a desperate last stand into a successful defense using nothing but spare parts and improvisation. They were fighting one of the galaxy's most dangerous threats with weapons they had built in less than 2 hours. And they were winning. When the battle finally ended, over 100 Kreshnak drones lay destroyed in the valley. The rest had retreated, returning to their main fleet. Sylth's crew had suffered no casualties. Not one. Lieutenant Chen walked over to Sylth, reloading his weapon casually. Not bad for a day's work. Your equipment made for pretty decent weapons. How? Sylth asked. How did you know that would work? Chen shrugged. Experience mostly, and a little bit of human stubbornness. We don't like to lose, Commander, so we get creative. Sylth looked at the destroyed Kreshnak scattered across the valley. He thought about everything he had witnessed: the impossible FTL exit, the reckless fighter pilots, the improvised weapons, the complete disregard for proper military procedure. It was chaos, pure, uncontrolled chaos. But it was chaos that saved lives. The victory on the moon gave them breathing room, but Commander Sylth knew it was not over. The Kreshnak hive mind was ancient and patient. It would not stop because of one defeat. Already his sensors showed the main fleet regrouping in the asteroid field. They were preparing for another attack. Captain Vasquez called a meeting in the Harmonious Accord's main conference room. Sylth, Lieutenant Chen, and several other officers gathered around the holographic display. The map showed the Kreshnak fleet in red. There were hundreds of contacts, but one was different. One was much larger than all the others. "That's the command ship," Vasquez said, pointing to the massive contact at the center of the fleet. "It's the hive mind's central node. Everything else is just extensions of it. Kill that, and the rest of the fleet falls apart." Sylth examined the tactical data. The command ship was enormous, the size of a small moon. Its hull was covered in weapons and defensive systems that had destroyed entire battle fleets in the ancient wars. According to the historical records, 3 Confederation armadas had attacked a Kreshnak command ship during the last war. None had survived. "Captain Vasquez, the Confederation military doctrine in such situations is clear," Sylth said carefully. "We should withdraw and report the fleet's location. Let the full military respond with appropriate force." Vasquez shook her head. "By the time the Confederation fleet arrives, this hive will have consumed half a dozen systems, more if they're efficient. No, we end this now." "With one ship?" Sylth could not keep the disbelief from his voice. "That is suicide." "Maybe," Vasquez admitted, "but humans have a bad habit of doing impossible things. Lieutenant Chen, what's our ordnance situation?" Chen checked his datapad. "We're down to 60% on missiles. Railgun ammunition is at 40%. We used a lot of our inventory during the fighter engagements." "Not ideal, but we can work with it." Vasquez studied the display, her predator eyes calculating distances and angles. "We'll do a gravity well slingshot. Use the moon's gravity to accelerate us beyond normal engine capacity. Hit them fast and hard before they can react." Sylth felt his blood run cold. "Captain, a gravity well slingshot at those velocities. The stress on your ship's structure would be catastrophic, and even if your ship survives, you would be moving too fast to maneuver effectively. You would have one pass at the target, and the Kreshnak will adapt to whatever weapons you use. Then we better make that one pass count." Vasquez looked around the table. "I'm not ordering anyone to come along on this. It's going to be dangerous, and honestly, we might not make it back. Anyone who wants to sit this one out can stay here with Commander Sylth's crew. No judgment." None of the human officers moved. Lieutenant Chen actually smiled. "Ma'am, with respect, where else would we be?" Vasquez nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "All right, then. Let's go kill a hive ship." 4 hours later, the Reckoning launched from the moon's surface. Sylth watched from his sensor station as the human vessel climbed out of the gravity well. Instead of moving away from the moon, it dove back down, using the gravity to accelerate. The ship's engines burned at maximum power, adding to the velocity from the gravitational pull. "They're exceeding safe speed limits," Korath reported, his voice tight with worry. "Hull temperature is rising. Structural stress is approaching critical levels." The Reckoning screamed through space at velocities that should have torn it apart. Pieces of outer armor broke away, unable to handle the forces. Emergency vents released superheated coolant in great streams. But the ship held together, driven by human engineering and sheer determination. The Kreshnak fleet detected the approaching vessel and began to respond. Hundreds of drones moved to intercept. The command ship's massive weapons arrays powered up, charging enough energy to vaporize a city. The reckoning did not slow down. It could not slow down at these speeds. "They're going to miss," Sylth said, watching the trajectory calculations. "At that velocity, even a small navigation error will send them past the target." But there was no navigation error. The human pilot flying that ship threaded between Kreshnak drones with centimeters to spare, making course corrections that required split-second timing and perfect precision. The Reckoning dove through the enemy fleet like a spear, aiming straight for the command ship's hull. Every weapon on the Reckoning fired at once. Missiles launched in rapid succession. Railguns fired solid slugs at relativistic speeds. Energy weapons burned at maximum power. The barrage hit the command ship's shields, overwhelming them through sheer concentrated firepower. But Vasquez was not trying to destroy the ship. Not yet. The Reckoning pulled up at the last possible moment, passing within 100 meters of the command ship's hull. As it passed, every communication system on the human vessel activated. They broadcast on every frequency, filling space with a transmission. On his sensor station, Sylth could see the data being transmitted. It was not a message in any known language. It was images and video, compressed into a rapid-fire stream of information. He accessed the transmission and watched in growing amazement. The transmission showed Earth's history, not the diplomatic history that humanity shared with the Confederation, but their real history. The violent, brutal truth of human evolution. Images of ancient humans hunting massive predators with primitive weapons. Video of human wars, armies clashing with swords and spears. The atomic explosions of the 20th century, mushroom clouds rising over destroyed cities, soldiers fighting in trenches filled with mud and death, ships burning on ancient oceans, the evolution of human weapons from stone tools to nuclear missiles. And through it all, one message repeated in simple mathematical language that any intelligence could understand. We are from Earth. We survived when everything tried to kill us. We fought each other for 1,000,000 years and learned every way to kill and survive. We speak your language. We understand violence. We understand survival. Stand down, or we will show you what a death world creates. The transmission lasted less than 30 seconds, but it contained hundreds of years of human history. The Kreshnak hive mind received it all, processed it all, understood it all. Sylth watched his sensors, waiting for the inevitable. The Kreshnak would adapt to the Reckoning's weapons and destroy it. That was what they did. That was what they always did. But the Kreshnak fleet did not attack. The drones stopped moving. The command ship's weapons powered down. For the first time in recorded history, the Kreshnak swarm hesitated. The hive mind was ancient, but it was not foolish. It operated on pure survival instinct, refined over millions of years. It had consumed thousands of civilizations, adapted to countless weapons and tactics. It knew prey when it saw it. It knew threats when it encountered them. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was something the Kreshnak had not encountered before. They were a species that had turned their entire evolution into a weapon. They had fought their way up from a world that tried to kill them every single day. They had warred with each other for millennia and survived it all. They had split the atom and pointed the resulting weapons at themselves, lived under the threat of total annihilation, and somehow not destroyed themselves. These were not soft civilizations like the Confederation. These were predators who had made it to space despite their world, despite themselves, despite everything. The Kreshnak hive mind calculated rapidly. The resources required to defeat humanity would be enormous. The cost in drones destroyed would be staggering. Even if it won, the losses would be crippling, and more humans would come. The death world would send more of its children. The calculation was simple. The cost exceeded the gain. The Kreshnak fleet turned away. The drones retreated back into the asteroid field. Within an hour, they had entered dormancy again, shutting down their systems and going back to sleep. The threat was over. On the bridge of the reckoning, Captain Vasquez let out a long breath. Well, that worked better than expected. Lieutenant Chen laughed, the sound filled with relief and adrenaline. Ma'am, did we just win a war by showing them our history? We showed them who we are, Vasquez corrected. Sometimes that's enough. The Kreshnak understand survival. They understand violence. We just proved that we understand it better. In his command post, Silth sat down heavily, his legs no longer able to support him. He had just witnessed something that should have been impossible. A single human ship had faced down a hive fleet and won without firing a final shot. They had spoken to the Kreshnak in a language older than civilization itself, the language of predators who refuse to be prey. 5 days after the battle, Commander Silth sat in his quarters aboard the Harmonious Accord. The ship's systems were mostly repaired, thanks to help from the human engineers. They had worked alongside his crew with surprising patience, showing the Velthani how to fix things using improvised solutions when proper parts were not available. Silth stared at his datapad, reading and rereading the report he was writing for the Confederation Council. He had been working on it for hours, trying to find the right words to explain what had happened. How did he describe the impossible? How did he make the council understand what he had witnessed? A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. Captain Vasquez entered, carrying 2 small containers. She had traded her formal uniform for more casual clothing, though she still moved with that same predatory confidence. She set one of the containers on Silth's desk. Thought you might be hungry, she said. I know Velthani metabolism needs frequent small meals. Silth opened the container and found it filled with Velthani nutrient paste, the emergency rations from his ship's stores. He was surprised. You remembered our dietary needs? Part of the job, Vasquez said, sitting down in the chair across from him without asking permission. She opened her own container, which held something that looked like compressed food bars. She took a bite and made a face. Though I'll admit your rations are better than ours. These taste like cardboard mixed with protein powder. Despite everything, Silth found himself almost smiling. If it helps, our rations taste like... What is the human phrase? Wet paper? Wet cardboard. We have that in common, at least. Vasquez ate another bite of her ration bar, then nodded at his datapad. Working on your report? Yes. I have been trying to write it for hours. Silth set down his eating utensil. How do I explain to the council what happened here? They will not believe it. I barely believe it. And I saw it with my own eyes. Just tell them the truth. The truth? Silth gestured at his datapad. The truth is that one human ship defeated a Kreshnak hive fleet that should have required an entire armada. The truth is that your people broke every rule of military engagement and won because of it. The truth is that you spoke to the Kreshnak using violence as a language and they understood you. That is the truth, and it sounds insane. Vasquez leaned back in her chair, thinking. Commander, can I tell you something about humanity? Something that might help you understand? Please. We evolved on a world that was actively trying to kill us, Vasquez began. The weather could kill you. The animals could kill you. The plants could kill you. Hell, even the bacteria could kill you. Earth has more ways to die than most species encounter in their entire evolutionary history. And we survived it all. She paused, taking another bite of her ration bar before continuing. But it wasn't just surviving that made us what we are. It was how we survived. We didn't get stronger bodies or natural weapons. We got something else. We got creativity, adaptability, the ability to look at a problem and think of 50 different solutions, even if 49 of them are stupid. Silth listened carefully, beginning to understand. Your people are excellent at planning, Vasquez continued. You follow protocols. You calculate risks. You do everything by the book, and that's not a bad thing. It's kept the Confederation stable for centuries. But humans? We write new books every time we face a problem. We improvise, we adapt, we overcome. Sometimes it looks like chaos to species that value order, but there's a method to our madness. A method to madness, Sylth repeated softly. Is that not a contradiction? Maybe, or maybe it's just a different way of thinking. Vasquez finished her ration bar and crumpled the wrapper. We didn't defeat the Kreshnak because we're stronger than them. We won because we're unpredictable. Because we think in ways they couldn't adapt to fast enough. Because when everything seems lost, humans have this terrible habit of trying one more impossible thing. Sylth thought about the fighter pilot who turned his ship into a bomb, about the Marines who built weapons from spare parts in 2 hours, about the gravity well slingshot that should have destroyed the Reckoning, but instead delivered them to victory, about the transmission that ended a war with history instead of weapons. You fight without fear, Sylth said quietly. Oh, we feel fear, Vasquez corrected. We just don't let it stop us. Fear is useful. It keeps you alert. But if you let fear control your decisions, you've already lost. Humans learned that lesson a long time ago, usually the hard way. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Sylth asked the question that had been bothering him since the battle ended. Captain, why did you come? When you received our distress call, you were days away. You had no obligation to help us. The Confederation has not even granted humanity full membership yet. Why risk your ship and crew for strangers? Vasquez smiled, and this time it was not the Predator's smile. It was something warmer. Because someone called for help. That's reason enough. Besides, humans remember what it's like to be alone and afraid. We spent thousands of years on our world thinking we were the only intelligent life in the universe. When we finally made it to space and found out we weren't alone, that was amazing. That changed everything. She stood up, preparing to leave. We're not going to let the galaxy fall apart when we just got here. We didn't claw our way up from Earth just to watch civilizations die when we could help. That's not who we are. After Vasquez left, Sylth returned to his report. He wrote for another hour. And this time, the words came easier. He described everything that had happened, holding nothing back. He included the humans' unconventional tactics, their reckless courage, their ability to improvise solutions from nothing. He attached all the sensor data, all the video recordings, everything the Council would need to verify his account. At the end of the report, Sylth added a personal recommendation, something he had never done in his 15 years of military service. The Confederation Council has debated humanity's petition for full membership for 2 years. The Council has expressed concerns about Earth's violent history, humanity's aggressive nature, and their unstable approach to problem solving. I understand these concerns. I shared them myself until 5 days ago. But I now believe we have been asking the wrong questions. We should not ask if humanity is safe to include in our Confederation. We should ask if we can afford to exclude them. The galaxy is not as safe as we pretend. Threats like the Kreshnak still exist. More dangers will emerge in time. When they do, we will need species who know how to fight back. We will need the Deathworlders. Humanity does not fight the way we do. They do not follow our protocols or respect our careful strategies. They are chaotic and unpredictable, but that is exactly what makes them valuable. They think in ways our enemies cannot predict. They solve problems in ways we never considered. They speak a language of survival that the universe understands. I recommend immediate approval of Earth's membership petition, not despite their differences, but because of them. The next time we face an extinction-level threat, we will need someone who speaks the language of chaos, someone who responds to a call for help with impossible solutions and stubborn determination. We will need the humans. Sylth transmitted his report to the Confederation Council. Then he walked to the bridge, where Korath was monitoring the sensors. "Commander, the human ship is preparing to depart," Korath reported. "They say their mission here is complete." Sylth watched the reckoning on the main view screen. The ship's repairs were incomplete, its hull still showing damage from the battle. But its engines were firing up, ready for another impossible journey through space. Captain Vasquez's voice came through the communication system one last time. "Commander Sylth, it's been an honor working with you. Your crew showed real courage during the fight. You should be proud of them." "Captain Vasquez, I must thank you again. You saved not just my crew, but potentially dozens of worlds. The Confederation owes you a debt." "No debt," Vasquez said. "Just promise me something. When the Council reviews your report, when they debate our membership, tell them what you saw here. Tell them the truth. That's all we ask." "I will, Captain. I promise." The reckoning pulled away from the moon, its engines leaving a bright trail across the dark sky. As Sylth watched it go, he thought about everything that had happened. A week ago, he had been a by-the-book military officer who believed in following protocols and trusting in proper procedure. Now he understood that sometimes you needed people who broke the rules. Sometimes you needed chaos to fight chaos. Sometimes you needed Deathworlders who spoke in the language of impossible victories. The human ship accelerated to FTL speeds and vanished in a flash of blue light, heading toward whatever crisis awaited them next. Sylth knew they would answer that call too, no matter how dangerous or impossible it seemed, because that was what humans did. When someone sent a cry for help, the Deathworlders answered, and they spoke in the language that the universe understood, the language of survival, adaptation, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Sylth smiled, something he rarely did. The galaxy was about to change. And perhaps, he thought, it was ready for the change, ready for humanity, ready for the beautiful chaos they would bring. 3 months later, the Confederation Council voted to grant Earth full membership. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. When humanity formally joined the galactic community, they brought with them their creativity, their courage, and their terrible habit of attempting impossible things. The galaxy would never be quite the same, and that, Commander Sylth decided, was exactly what it needed.